Hello everyone, this is Himali. Welcome to my channel. I talk about astrology a lot, and astrology is a science of the stars, our destiny, our fate, and a lot of inner work and a lot of things that are related to our inner world that ultimately reflects in the outer world. But this was something I had not known, and when I started questioning about free will, when I started questioning about destiny, and what are really these two things, I figured out that there's a lot more to what is said. And I dive deep into different experiences. Most of those experiences came to me from some of the meditation practices that I had started because a dear friend of mine had recommended that to me. And it brought me to a world wherein I could understand my own sensations, my body, and my body mind in a better way. So meditation is also something that you do with open eyes. It's also something that you do in a very different way. That's how I got introduced to anxiety and depression and a lot of other things in the body that are a part of the known and part of the unknown. It's about conscious mind, subconscious mind, the unconscious mind. And because of that, I downloaded this application called Insight Timer, wherein I was introduced to a meditation master by the name Oliver James. And it so happened that I started following on him on Instagram, and just sent him his beautiful scripts, meditation scripts. So here we are. We have with us Oliver on our live. We're not able to see you.
Hold on.
Yeah, sure. So there's one thing.
There we go.
Yay! Nice to have you here. He's an expert on somatic healing, um, anxiety. He also works with sound healing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the one of the scripts that I came across on Insight Timer was on anxiety and relief from anxiety only, and that's when I was introduced to a world of free will and destiny in reality, because astrology talks a lot on what is set in the stone, set in the stars, but then there is a world which is a lot about free will. There's a world which talks about freedom, and that can only be understood when we work with our mind and body. So that's why I have Oliver here with me today. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me, Kamali.
Yeah. I have a lot of young people and actually people from all age groups following me. And I have tried to. Is my internet a little fuzzy today?
No, it's okay. It's okay. I can hear you just fine.
All right, all right. And a lot of people have a lot of questions on freedom. A lot of people have questions on understanding the true nature of this life. And I feel that when somebody goes into the experience of healing, body and mind, and actually uncovering and discovering the truth of life, that's when you get to know healing. That's what I really feel. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is that today's day we have a lot of pressure, especially the youth. It's the time of Instagram, it's the time of social media, and everybody is constantly comparing themselves with other people. um, Anxiety is a very hush hush topic. Nobody wants to reveal that I'm actually going through something. What are some of the visual, some of the bodily cues with which one can understand that I do have an anxiety and I actually need to do something about it?
Well, I think there are lots of cues. However, some people find themselves so stimulated or so down that it would kind of like be asking a goldfish to describe the water that it's in. So often people, they go through this experience, I feel, of becoming self-aware that somehow their situation could be different. Their experience of themselves, their life circumstances.
Yeah.
And I think it especially shows up in relationships. With regards to anxiety and depression, I think the bodily cues can be this kind of manic cycle, having lots of energy and then not very much energy, or generally feeling quite down and subdued. And also, I think it shows up in our physical health too. So people might notice a skin issue that suddenly appears, or they might suddenly notice that they have no energy, or they get headaches, or they've got stiffness in their joints. I think for the younger generation who have, as far as I can see, a lot of creative potential, I think that starts to affect their hearts and how they feel about themselves. So their self narrative can be quite down. And I think quite often people start to notice it more when they actually have an interaction with somebody who has sort of some level of mastery of that cycle. So they have an interaction, maybe like with a meditation, such as mine, or they meet somebody in a shop. And invariably for the younger people, I think this is something that's missing in culture, is that older people have obviously gone through some of those experiences. So, for example, if you've got a teenage girl or a woman in her young 20s, perhaps trying to find her identity and her way, an interaction with a lady or a grandmother who's maybe 50 plus, who's quite comfortable in their skin and sort of looks to them eye to eye and says, "What's up, my darling? Like, what do you want to be?" Or like, "How do you want to be?" That person might come away thinking, "Ah, do you know what? What I'm feeling isn't as real, or I don't have to accept it as much as possibly I think I do." So for me, I think that one of the key things to look at is the quality of your relationships, how much you're present in them, but also how rewarding they are. Because I think when people are depressed or very anxious, they have and sort of substitute real, deep, meaningful for relationships for peripheral ones where people aren't really interacting very much, or indeed a relationship with their phone or the projection of people that they offer. So I think for the people that I work with, there's almost, in many senses, an awareness that there should be more to this. There should be more to this experience. Surely I can be calmer in this environment. Surely I shouldn't have to live like this. And in a way, I think you almost sometimes have to get sick of feeling sick to be able to imagine a new way of being. And then hopefully, usually, the sort of situation, resource, teacher, opportunity will come in to help you catalyze that new way of being.
Beautiful, because it also covered a lot on how sometimes we feel that the bodily sensations or what the mind is trying to project or make you feel that this is real is not. And that's why we actually also hear a lot of new types of diseases these days, because I think it's the body trying to give cues about something that's going on within your very deep reality, but people are not able to tap into that.
Yes, and I think also there are there's a requirement for community and communion. So
Yeah.
psychologically, the kind of cult of self that has kind of emerged and is emerging, I guess, in that export of sort of Western culture is perhaps not very helpful, because there's a lot of people trying to go, "Oh, I'm feeling all these things. I need to solve it on my own. I need the next self-growth book, or I need to do this meditation, or I need to do this practice," when actually they just need to be held by a healthy community. And I think you talk about astrology and free will. I think in that kind of change of ages that we're all experiencing in many ways, we're really coming out of, or perhaps evolving into a new layer, the idea of the individual and the experience of the collective. So I feel that my interpretation of that, in terms of that astrological palette that we're given when we're born, we're able to draw down on these archetypal energies in a particular way, but it is very much our soul that gets to choose that karma, if you like, is not a trap, but a springboard and an opportunity. So I think that there's a lot of restlessness in people where subconsciously there's many souls being born into this time that have a high level of self-awareness, but not necessarily the culture to bring it out of them. So those people who are sensitive or do have that, they kind of feeding themselves with all sorts of information. But I think thinking about this call, and something that I would really like to highlight, is that it's really the exhale in these times that is going to help us, because we're inhaling, taking in information in so many different ways, that just that ability to return, that we can exhale and enjoy that experience, is really going to help us discern what information is useful for us and what information is not. And I think also within every individual's consciousness, there's kind of this seesaw between tradition and the modern. What do we like from this pot of tradition, and what should we preserve and take forward? And also, what are we being called to evolve it into? Because you can't just throw away tradition, because these are things, practices, that aren't just about ideas and philosophies. These are things that have kept people alive, and they've kept communities together, and they've kept women safe during pregnancy, or they've helped people deal with the transition of death and grief and all these different things. But equally, some of them might not be so appropriate for these times anymore, when we live in a different way and in a different space.
Yeah.
So I think it's a big art. Basically, there's a lot being asked of people during these times. So it's good to have these conversations, and also have reflected back to us that, like you say, we shouldn't be isolated in that experience of feeling attached or anxious or depressed, but actually to put words to it and be visible in it often makes it easier for people and the universe, if you like, to respond to our desire.
Wow, so it also means that there is an essence of connection that is needed when we talk about dealing with issues like anxiety, that community, connection.
For me personally, yes, in my own experience with those issues, and also helping people, the people that I see make the most epic progress, and it stands still in them and becomes embodied, are those that can start to realize that they are more than just who they think they are. So that's in a spiritual soul self, but also as part of a living, breathing humanity and community and sort of earth consciousness too. Because in the West, for example, there's the practice of secular mindfulness, which is sort of divorced from that soul-based practice, which I will be upfront, I find quite funny, and almost think it could be quite dangerous for me anyway, because if I tried to solve all my things within my own thoughts without opening up to what I don't know, I would just end up looping within my own idea of things, which I don't think is very healthy. So your spiritual practice can be connecting to the soul and allowing that to affect the physiology and the body and help you with those issues of anxiety or depression. Or equally, it could be going to somewhere in your community where people are needing help, or you're getting outside of yourself into somebody else's world. And this is a really important process, because you're learning to advocate for yourself that no matter how you feel, you are welcome. And no matter how you feel, your light and your soul have something to offer. And I think something that I see across Earth, amongst all cultures, is a real kind of questioning. So, in the West, it's very apparent that although it thinks it's very modern and secular and technological and intelligent, it hasn't really dealt with the sort of Christian idea that you need to be pure before you can connect to the divine. And I see this as well in Eastern traditions too, where people are actually going, is this really the case? Do I need to atone and repent and all these different things constantly? Because actually, when I sit and I look out and I see the horizon and I hear the birds, they're not asking anything from me to enjoy that. And it's a massive psychological shift for everybody. And of course, it shows up in the microcosm of the individual. Oh my God, I feel anxious. I can't go there. I can't eat this. Oh my God. Oh my God. And unfortunately, it's that, oh my God, that closes us off from the world. So wherever you feel like you're closing off from the world and you feel frightened to, one of the
Yeah.
first steps is to learn to create a bit more safety within the body, to do things that help you really foster that safety so that you can engage. But it's really the engagement that is important. So we've talked a bit about Western culture and my view on it too for some of your listeners, because I know that, across the East, more and more people are becoming exposed to some of those ideas, especially through social media and technology. And one thing I'd really sort of add a bit of caution to is what I would call the cult of self. People can meditate and think they're so spiritual and awesome and eat organic and drink smoothies and all these different things. But if you're not engaged with the world, then you're really just kind of beautifying. And that's quite dangerous, because we actually do need to be in each other's lives in a meaningful way, because that's not really real. In 50, 100 years, people aren't going to look back at the Instagram reel that had 100,000 plays. They're going to look back and think about the time they met that person in the park and had a really meaningful conversation, or that time that they went out of their way to help somebody and it was so beautifully appreciated. There's, obviously as well, a massive protest movement across the world for different reasons. And I often get asked about this issue too. I refrain from supporting those because a much more radical act would be for everybody to knock on their neighbour's door and say, is there anything I can do for you today? Because then you're creating something constructive. And in fact, you're removing the power resistance from the authority bed back into the sovereignty of people. So all of these issues psychologically for the individual at the moment are having this reflection in the collective, right? So it's very important that people embrace their well-being and embrace this idea of sovereignty, which is sort of and you have that connection and that ability to connect to that divine element, and it will speak to you, and you can speak to it whenever and however you want. So I make meditations for anxiety, and I might not mention any of the concepts that I've just mentioned, but essentially and tonally, everything that I'm talking about comes across because I'm just whispering to people, breathe in, breathe out, feel your body, feel how you are now, and notice the changes that are going on within you. And all of a sudden, they're bringing their attention back into themselves, having a refresh. And I think that's twofold. It helps them and their body and their mind, but it also is a bit like in that stillness, some of the energetic debris that people pick up from being on social media, rushing around a city, talking to this person, talking to that person, it can just sort of, that energetic hygiene is very important. And quite often with people with severe anxiety or severe depression, you know,
I'm sorry, I missed out on the quite energetic hygiene is important and quite often. After that, I don't know, there's something, some lag in my
So,
internet.
yeah, energetic hygiene is really important, and quite often people who come to see me one-on-one with severe anxiety and depression,
Yes.
they they're full of the world, full of opinions, full of other people's energies, full of memories, and they just need a space to allow themselves to come to ground, really, really, really to come to ground. And I think one of the things that I advocate for is living closer to the natural world. So in the West, it's quite funny because people will never have their feet on the earth. They'll never have the soil in their hands, and they might eat the perfect diet because it's got the right carbs, proteins, fats, but it's not full of life. It's not like a freshly picked leaf, and it's not something that is designed to be tasty and to enrich the soul. And they don't eat together. And equally in the West, they don't eat with their hands. So they're like disconnected. So all these levels of disconnection start to add up, start to add up, start to add up until a person is just living in their own head. And that's the problem. Basically, that's really the problem that arises. So I think in that melting pot of culture at the moment, everybody can sort of take things from everybody, because one of the things that the West is good at culturally is perhaps weighing up ideas. If the body and the mind is grounded, then the ability to logically assess, is this useful, is this not, is a good technique. But if the body isn't grounded, and you're using your mind, it's just nonsense. You're using nonsense to make sense of the world around you. And equally, I think that in terms of becoming a global community and learning from each other, that's something that's really important and dear to me. And I think that ultimately, the only way that that can happen is not through ideology, but through your heart and seeing people, feeling people. That's pretty much it. Because when you meet somebody, when you connect with somebody, your heart, your body is suddenly connected with them, and you're learning to breathe, learning to grow with each other. And it's so, so important. There's no substitute for that. There just isn't. People need people.
Beautiful is the word, because I now I understand why you're an expert at anxiety, and this is completely your passion, because from one thing it's like a thread intertwined and you sort of solved all of them in one conversation. If I start inviting you more, I think will sort of it would be like a master class. But I actually want all my followers who are from all age groups to go and visit his website, look him up on the internet. Of course, you're going to find his meditation um, meditation sets on Insight Timer and otherwise on his website as well, because I have taken a lot of help from some of the scripts that you've recorded, and it made a lot of more sense to me when you said that we're not grounded, but we're trying to make sense of the world, and it's not rooted in reality actually. And it's happening to all of us. Even though if I'm an astrologer, I like to be real here. Astrology happens in the mind most of the times. People do not try to make sense of the star and the wisdom that comes from the stars in their body as well. So that's why I end
In
up
that
talking a lot about medical astrology and a lot more things. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a real interesting crossover between all at that higher esoteric teaching across all the world's philosophies. Is this
Yes.
central idea that astrology, your body is basically the stars projected down, right? So you are this fractal, or this as above, so below representation. So it's this interesting conscious matrix. And I think um One of the things that makes me personally sad is, and this is just my opinion because I see the damage of it here in the West, and I don't think it has to be this way, but seeing developing countries adopt Western technological practices because there is an organic technology that exists in the earth of the body, of the soul, and it's super, super important. And people are replacing that organic body with a sort of inorganic technological AI structure, which robs them almost of their creativity. And
Yeah.
that's something that I've learned through my practice more and more, which hits you day by day by day in different ways, is that the sort of Gnostic and Western alchemical traditions, or the Tao in China, or Vedic philosophies, these are not spiritual. These come from a time where spirituality and science and life were all this dynamic structure. There was no division, so it's interesting as we go through in our minds now, thinking, okay, how can I live like that? How can I breathe and be and take on information and take on suggestions rather than thinking, I need to believe this because it's in the Vedic scriptures. I need to believe this because a scientist at Oxford University said it was true, or I need to believe this because a politician is telling me this is the right thing to do. What do I feel? And I know that you're a teacher and you interact a lot with young people, and I think that generation is quite misunderstood because they can appear quite stubborn and know it all, when actually I feel that they have this knowing, like, no, no, I'm not going to just take that on passively. So I'm very excited about that, super excited.
And don't tell me about it because I know somewhere, and I've not been able to exercise that freedom a lot in the education system that I was in. In today's time, I try to execute different teaching practices in the classroom, although this is completely about a thing which is not related to this channel. I am a teacher for the primary years children. I work with children right from ages 3 to 12 years old. But yes, that, school or education systems are that one place wherein a lot of the character of the person and how they perceive this world is developed, actually, because I was scared to death. To this date, I see the effects of what happened to me in the classroom till now. So I try to have a healthy system of fear. I mean, I know the fear is important, but in what sense it being, disseminated is one of the things I think a lot about as teacher. It just opened up, several other things that I have in my mind. And while we have discussed a lot about so many things so far, and this has been such a meaningful conversation, because wisdom doesn't, I'm so sorry, knowledge doesn't really help. It's the wisdom of the body that actually helps, especially in today's time where everyone is feeling as if, somebody is about to forget me, somebody is about to not, somebody may not see my act of achievements and what I have done. So I need to be on social media. I need to post this. I need to post that. I need to be there. But all of it has become in the mind rather than in the community. And as you said, that this is happening in the collective consciousness, it's impacting everyone. So it's
Mm-hmm.
important to talk about these things. How would you, I know that grief is also, actually, I do not know much about it. That's why my question comes, how to deal with grief, how to deal with suicidal ideation and depression.
So there's something I'll lead with here, which is an unusual way to frame it. Working with people and obviously helping them with the fear and experience of suicidal ideation. Now, obviously, society treats that as a very bad thing. Um, However, and this is kind of something to get your head around. If a person is contemplating suicide, or indeed they choose that option, there's an identification within themselves that goes, my experience is so unbearable that I need to end it. And I think it's very taboo to talk about, because what a person is actually doing there is here's my experience, and my awareness or my experience of my experience can't take this anymore. So in a weird way, it's sort of an affirmation of that larger part or the soul of us. And it's very taboo, because if there's one thing, even within very religious cultures, one taboo thing is to say, I am a soul and I am free. That's like the most taboo thing you can say, because it changes everything, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same within grief, because if you have an experience or a loss that causes a grief or a bereavement, a loss of a loved one too, you are suddenly experiencing this dislocation from a part of you that was easy to access, or you had an expectation around, or you were building a future around. And in terms of dealing with grief, I would reframe it and just say we need to feel grief. We need to allow ourselves to process that in healthy ways. So a good analogy would be, if you've got a really busy day, really stressful, lots of things, lots of interruptions, lots of curveballs coming your way. If you know that you've got a hot bath at the end of the day, you can go, got that hot bath later, I can deal with this. So it's a bit like the same with grief. If we know that we've got a person to talk to, we know that we've got some stillness to experience that, or we start to trust ourselves that we are competent and we can create that space to feel our grief, it doesn't feel so overwhelming when we're in our day to day. I mean, ideally, me and my wife talk about this all the time. There would be places to go for these experiences, which would be a loving community that you could go and stay with, and you would just be fed healthy meals, hearty meals, things to do, and just sleep and rest and have nature, because that would be a holding space for those people, because it's not very productive to have somebody who is depressed or in grief working a job, creating, looking after older people or children. We should actually recognize the utility of these things. But so it's definitely about feeling and a reframe of what we value. So in the West, in the corporate world, this is an example, right? There's always efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. We need to cut costs, cut jobs, do this. So a good example would be a hotel. And in the hotel, you have the concierge or the doorman, right? So on paper, the doorman's job, all he does is open doors. So let's get rid of him, right? Let's get rid of the concierge. But then the culture of the hotel starts to decline, because the doorman, he welcomes people in. He makes sure their needs are met. He interacts with people. And this is where we need to start actually putting front and center. My ability and space to feel is possibly one of the most important things I can do, because it's the glue for everything else. And I feel that it affects men and women slightly differently because of that emotional difference. But essentially, to feel connects people to their dharma, their mission, what they feel called to, and it enriches their free will. But it requires us to let go of what we thought we know. Some people experience great grief when, like an athlete who's been training to enter into a sport competitively, and then they have an injury, and it means that they can't pursue that life path anymore. There will be grief there as the body reconstitutes around this shift in reality, yeah? And equally, as somebody might lose their spouse or their loved one, and then there's this grief. There's this deep, deep grief about what they thought their life was going to be. And losing this person and losing access to this version of themselves that they felt around this person. But it's so important. And what I would say is that this is the beauty of taking that time in presence and in soul, is that you start to recognize, not in a philosophy or with language, but within the body, that you are not alone in this experience. You are not alone in that grief, and you are not alone in that depression. You are felt. And in fact, one of the things that I think a lot of the world religions misses is that as much as we can be in appreciation of the divine and God, God and the divine is an appreciation of us. Like if you sit by a tree, and you're there breathing and with your heart open, the tree appreciates you too. So it's very funny to me that people often push for this high vibration state, that's the thing you need to be. But actually, being in those deeper vibrations, those deeper waters of grief, sadness, pain, envy, bitterness, they're all useful parts of the emotional spectrum. And what I see is that the most magnetic people are those who have the ability to feel a large portion of their spectrum. And the most sometimes even the most violent people, what they're feeling inside is very tense because they're not able to hold that violence within them, and let it breathe and let it experience. Because quite often people get afraid of these deeper parts of their being, but to feel is not necessarily to be. So at some point you have to feel, otherwise your body will start to have problems. That's basically it. Then you will have to listen. You will have to listen,
So if any one of you is listening and you feel that in today's time of 9 to 5 and the hustle bustle of whatever that you are doing is that I'm incapable because I'm not able to, I feel tired, I feel restless, I don't feel connected, that is because somewhere or the other that space has not been created to feel. So create more spaces to feel, um, and all the astrology in the world will start to work for you. But the first thing that you need to do is you need to feel, you need to be with yourself, and do not put label to these things, because often the system in today's time, as James is saying, is that um, productive, and productivity is the bar for, I'm so sorry for the background noise.
No, that's
Productivity,
okay.
yeah, it's children playing. But you're not incapable, and it's not that you are limited, it's just that you need to be more of yourself, you need to be more authentic with the parts of you that you've buried somewhere deep within, and you find a sense of shame in bringing that out. And while you clearly do not need to do this in public, you can have your own space wherein you just allow yourself to be whoever you are. Otherwise, there's a very small link between, or the bridge that is there of mind to the body, it starts showing up in the body, as James has said. So, and there was also one thing that came in my heart very strongly, that you talked about culture, and you talked about how, someone who's experiencing grief, sadness, or the inability to connect with themselves is fed a warm food, given hugs, and is a part of a loving community in the collective consciousness, because one individual is also not connected to themselves, the ability to feel love within one's own individuality has gone down. So, in the collective consciousness, also, it has sort of, I would say, created a little scarcity of love. Although this is not the final judgment that we should believe in, but definitely have it, something that we can take away from this is that we have to also increase a vibration or a frequency of love within us, if nothing. Because
Yeah.
it just, when you said this thing, this was the first thought or some sort of feeling that came to me, that if we see, yes, a feeling of love has sort of gone a little down. Maybe. I am not coming to any conclusions, but maybe. You never know.
I think if you were a soul that wanted to learn an experience about love,
Yeah.
then you would probably do so in an environment where you had to imagine how to make that possible.
Yeah.
So, drawing points from this entire conversation, I
Yeah.
think what we're seeing and what we're asking to experience is actually a redefinition of our access to and the abundance of love. And I think that the interesting thing is that if you were to actually ask honestly people within their own selves and their own emotional world and experience, they're like, actually, I've really felt this kind of stripping away of illusion within myself, that actually love and all these different things are only a choice or a little kind of very subtle movement away. But at the same time, in the media and what we're being told people think is that everything's bad, everyone's fighting. But I don't think that's the case, So it's interesting. We kind of have to, the closer we get, a bit like shame, the closer we get to the heart of what's behind that shame, the louder the voices become. Because it's part of us, part of our psychology that was useful. If you think about cultures all over the world having very strict rules about things, people
Yeah.
point to that and say, oh, that's bad, that's awful, that's abusive. But these were rules that kept people safe in a way with what they knew and where their agreements about reality were. But as we change our agreements about reality and our agreements about ourselves, so must our culture be updated too.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, in all of these spiritual practices, when you actually look at them, they're all saying, this is not finished. This is never going to be finished. This is constantly evolving, constantly growing like a fractal of infinity. It's always expanding. And you, if you choose, can be part of that too.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that I have conversations with people around the world from all different cultures, all different demographics, all different spectrums of the economic spectrum too. And the thing that I find really interesting is, and you talked about it a bit with your teaching, is that there's people in all of these traditional roles: teacher, lawyer, policeman, cleaner, farmer. But there's this connection between them all. They're all thinking to themselves, oh, okay, there's something more here. And I just want to say that for those of you who are doing that, you really, really make a difference. For me, in my own mind and humor, I think it's those people and those small acts of consciousness and love that mean that the world hasn't ended and hasn't destroyed itself. And actually, it's not some big hero in a cape or a politician. It's those people listening who choose to lean into what is rather than do what they supposedly should. Because there's all sorts of scenarios, whether it be the doctor who takes a little bit more interest in their patient, or the teacher who stays a little longer with that child who doesn't necessarily need help, but they just need somebody there to show them that they care, you know? Or maybe the policeman who doesn't arrest that person because they can sense that that would cause a pattern in that person's life that would just write it off, and that that person was at the wrong place at the wrong time. So it's interesting that our sovereignty comes up against these limits of culture and law. And I think that even economically, this will all be redefined within this century, because there's too many, there's too many of these kids. They're not gonna have it. They're just not gonna have it. They'll say, we're not doing that.
Yes.
Yes. So at the core, what you're talking about, grief and shame, these are two very important factors in today's world. Two emotions and emotional worlds that we must journey into, rather than kind of try and beautify and performatively say, "Oh, I've healed my grief." Because it doesn't make any difference. Like, it's your life, and if you want to live like an artist, somebody who's able to create, um, and I think that it is possible. But yeah, it touches my heart too to think of that community that would hold us as we go through these transitions. And I think that something also that I see becoming more and more important is that women have support from other women, and men have support from other men,
Yeah.
and that can kind of join in the middle, and that kind of battle of the sexes, if you like, is able to kind of fade away a little bit as we come together and think, okay, what do we want to create? And really, the interesting thing to me, Hamali, is that you hear a lot of people talk about these issues, issues of culture, issues of identity, and they never mention children. It's like they're so vain that they don't even realize that there's a world that we pass on to others, like they're so vain that they think it's all about kind of them. And that's kind of a crazy place to be, in my opinion. So if you're thinking about that, about the world that you want to live, about children, about the elderly as well, and how we're going to care for them, then I want you to recognize that you are more connected, and as such more powerful than everybody else who's kind of flashy and, shiny. Because there's a phrase here in England, not all that glitters is gold.
Exactly.
And that's something to remember. And this is why we must advocate for each other, and say, you're doing a great job. Keep it up. The world, the world wants you. The world needs you.
Exactly. And as a father of two, right? That you are.
6.
6. We've got a lot of parental wisdom as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they bring out a lot of this wisdom in me, because they are taskmasters. They'll let you know when you're going wrong, for sure.
Lovely. Um, that's why a lot of people experience like a life shift after they become parents, because they're able to step into the shoes of the child and then recollect their childhood trauma. And parenthood actually becomes the journey for them to heal not only their inner child but then everyone's. And that's why I have seen in the last 5 to 6 years, I've seen a trend on social media of how the parents actually became these childhood experts. I don't know what to put. What is that word for it? What is that term for it? That they go ahead and they teach new
Yeah,
parents about parenthood and how it is. And it is a very this is something that is taken very frivolously. People don't take it in the right manner. That what a big responsibility it is to be a parent. Such a big responsibility, because in Hindi there is this thing called as sanskar. that you take your sanskar and you pass it on to the other generations.
Yeah.
You can only pass on what you have. So the impressions or the values that you hold, you pass it on to them. And why can't we actually pass on something that is more freeing? Because we were caught, and what we give to the next generation is again more and more of imprisonment. That's what I'm talking about. So what I got to hear from you today was again a, an essence of freedom put into parenthood. Like, again. So
Yeah, it takes a bit of a shift, I think, because a good example would be mothers and daughters, right? Which is a very difficult relationship.
oh
So
my god.
obviously, yeah. So quite often the mother will kind of, without knowing it, sometimes try and restrict the daughter's freedom, because it kind of grates upon the places in her where she didn't feel free. And if you take that, you can take that as a negative cycle. But another way to look at it is that the offspring is drawing upon that ancestral and genetic wisdom to live the dreams of their ancestors that they weren't able to realize. And this is a very different way to look at it. It's a very interesting shift because actually, we can feel that. And, working with all sorts of people, the top tier difficult relationship is mother daughter. That is the primary most difficult one, I feel, in all the people that I've worked with, because a mother is growing a woman, a fellow life giver within her body, and then sees her grow into all of that potential and also all of that vulnerability. So it's this real confusing mirror, like you say, of childhood trauma back to them. So if we can just breathe out and relax a bit and actually come back to, oh my God, at the core of all of that thought is the love that I have for this person. If I were to filter out all of the noise, delete all of the extras, right at the core, I can see the love between the eyes. And this is why one of the practices that I also do with people in person is to eye gaze. So I will sit in front of them, hold their hands, and just look into their eyes for extended periods of silence, because it just starts to fade away. So that's definitely a top tip for any of your listeners if they have romantic partners or people they're friends with that are able or want to do that. Is just to sit or stand in front of each other, hold each other's hands, and just look each other in the eye and breathe. And it's really interesting, taking some of that Western scientific and psychological medical science,
Yeah.
that it's exactly the same thing, because when we're anxious and we're depressed, all of our awareness is in our front, because we're worried about being attacked, because obviously this is our most vulnerable line. But when we're relaxed, we can feel and sense our backs and the world around us. So that practice of eye gazing and talking to people gets us interested, and then we get their interest back, and then we just start to feel more and more relaxed and settled in ourselves. But as you know, any busy mother, any neurotic mother who's like, they're not very relaxed themselves, because the culture that they grew up in said that those women weren't allowed to look after themselves. They always had to be too much out of themselves. So that sometimes it's about recognizing, oh my God, the people that came before me made sacrifices. They did the best that they could do with what they knew. And rather than going back and trawling through history and my own heritage and pointing the finger of blame, actually think about, well, God, I have this opportunity to be part of something.
So I talk a lot about ancestral healing, and this is ancestral healing summed up to you in the last 3-4 minutes that we both were conversing,
Yeah.
because this is an opportunity for most of us to not. It's very easier said than done, but little bit of self actualization will help you go a longer way and not repeat patterns of the family, because you are not holding or bearing the baggage or the burden
Yes.
to become free. uh, this is where it starts. So when you are free, you can pass it on to others. And I think so. Being so much in the past or future also doesn't help when it comes to astrology. People link it with that, but it's all about the present moment. Why is it that you feel that fear constantly? Instead of beating yourself up about it, try to understand yourself from a place of love. It's because somewhere or the other that child who heard that dialogue constantly again and again, that you're not safe from your mother or your father, it keeps on repeating.
Yes.
uh,
This
so
this is why all of these things about taking time in your senses, whether that be meditation or going out in the natural world, is important, because you come in to the present, right, which is an evolving space, which offers opportunity, which offers new resources, which offers deeper ways to understand yourself. And it's interesting technologically, obviously we have AI that really just copies old things and gives you new versions of them, right? That mental trap is AI is kind of not a new technology as far as I can see. It's worked in these ways that people think and the ways that people treat each other, because they're not stopping and going, what creative potential do I have in this moment? But this is why that very simple act is so disrupting to my mental world and also the collective, because it's like it is love in the most powerful of ways. It is nurturing and inclusive and compassionate, but is also excluding, discerning, and truthful. So it won't allow itself to be diluted. And it's this really interesting paradox where my thoughts, my opinions, my beliefs are my own world, and where somebody else is different in that, it doesn't make either one right or wrong. But the track that we can join on is love, because it just beautifully reduces down, like mathematics, like reducing down an equation to the base part. And we can both point at that and go, yeah, that's great. And from that place, fireworks, it's rather than trying to compare and criticize and reflect and all these different things. And that's where, um, interestingly, I think sometimes Western culture can be quite toxic in that all of this debating, criticizing, and hierarchies, and this is right and this is wrong. Um, you know, I don't really get it, and also I don't really get. You hear of lots of, I mean, this is my opinion, lots of scientific studies into things which are just common sense. Like, so what? Why? Why bother? Like we are living, breathing things. So obviously this is going to be good for us, or it's going to benefit us, or whatever it is. And equally, science is not a thing.
yeah.
It's the curiosity of the individual. It's the curiosity of the soul. And in terms of replicating results, they're only general rules, just like astrological placements. Yeah, everything is just very, very, very nuanced. But again, I think talking to you, Hamali, as well personally, um, because I'm sure this is part of your experience too.
Yeah.
You're probably not always so aware that the depth of these thoughts and the ease of these concepts within your mind and within your body is not a common thing. It is not a common thing amongst the general population. So one of the things that I teach, although I'm teaching this potentiality that everybody could have this, I also teach to an individual like you, start to walk around the earth with that knowing. It doesn't mean that you're a know-it-all and you look down on people, but then it also means that you know who you are. You know what you don't know, but you also know who you are, and that is somebody who aligns with that. And therefore, when you walk into a room, you arrive with that energy, or you sit and look at the horizon, you feel part of that creation and get that nourishment of self. You know, super, super, super important for so many people who have these thoughts and ideas and who are sensitive to the energies of the world, that they advocate for that in themselves and we advocate for that in each other. So if you see somebody that you notice this in, or you see somebody who looks beautiful or did a good thing, tell them, you know, open up that conversation, take that risk.
Yes. Beautiful. So, I mean, I can let this conversation be on and on.
I
But I
know, I need to go too.
yes,
Yeah.
I don't need to go anywhere after talking, because I can fetch out so many things. But it's morning for you, and it's about to be evening for us, and start working with your body. This is for everyone who is just going on a series of what the world is saying around them and not really listening to their bodies and their mind and soul. Before you label yourself as sick, try to understand what is it that is really going on with you. Do not try to label yourself out of alignment. I would say come in alignment, bring your soul,
Yeah.
bring yourself back into alignment. And one of the things that James has mentioned, that importance of meditation, importance of having a meditation practice, whether it is 2 minutes or 10 minutes. For that you can go to his website. Definitely check out his work. There are lots of things available on his website, including his own story, which I went through and I really liked a lot. He's also available on Insight Timer, and I'm sure that there must be many other meditation apps that you must have worked
Mhm.
with. Yeah, so please go and check it out, because meditation helps a lot. We have in this entire conversation talked about how it helps. Even if you start with a 1 or 2 minute practice, that's good, but start with it and you will see a lot of shifts in your inner reality as well as outside. Thank you so much for joining, James. It was wonderful to have you. I felt so
Thank you
grounded,
too, Hamali.
so present, and absolutely you touched my heart in so many ways. Through this conversation, I felt that I am not alone. I'm not the only one. And
Good.
I can only imagine the impact of this conversation, that how it's going to reach so many people, whether it is old or young, it doesn't matter. It's going to reach a soul and they're going to feel so connected. So this is also one of the message that indirectly James and the conversation that I had to give was that take a risk, be human, go out, connect with people, at least connect with the immediate people that you have around, and seek more connection first with yourself and then with others. So yeah, we'll just bring it to an end. Do you have any last words for the viewers who are going to watch this? Anything?
No, I think take a risk. That's the best advice you could give. People already know really what risks they want to take, whether it's going to do that dance class or being honest with their parents or whatever it might be. You know, you already know where the bridge is. So take that little step. And if you find it too scary, what I would ask you to do is just feel some of the fear of that. Maybe write down what's the worst that could happen or what's the best that could happen, and just give yourself a way to kind of get it out of you. But yeah, definitely take a risk.
Yay! So with this, we are going to both sign out from this live, and I'll tag Oliver in this reel. So yeah.
Yes, thank you, Hamali, and thank you very much for having me. I'll speak to you soon. Bye, everyone.
Yes. Bye bye.